Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Muhammad Laiq Siddiqui, the father of Holophase. Remember the language we are learning. There is one field, phi, the holophase, one continuous cyclic movement from which all of reality unfolds. When phi begins to change, its first derivatives appear, and with them, the three dimensions show themselves at once. Time as omega, space as k, and motion as v, built from both. Every higher derivative is a finer question about how phi changes, and each one casts three shadows together: a time shadow, a space shadow, and a motion shadow. These echoes mix and weave into one another, forming the patterns we call fields, particles, bodies, thoughts, and worlds. In this picture, everything that exists is a living tapestry of phi, endlessly echoing through its derivatives and their dimensional shadows. Today, we focus on one essential component of the epistemic firewall. In this part 11, we cover the sophisticated, final grade filter of row-level uncertainty and stability radii. This is the mechanism that quantifies not just the uncertainty in a single measurement, but the uncertainty and robustness of a rule itself. The skill you will gain is the ability to read a scientific law not as a perfect crystalline truth, but as a licensed, packaged product with explicit quality ratings. Its confidence, its stability range, and its sensitivity profile. Our core question is, how do we attach uncertainty to the rule itself, not just to measurements? This is the pinnacle of epistemic honesty. Up to now, we have attached uncertainty delta to phi sentences, to individual observations. But rule G is a higher order object, inferred from many such sentences. It too is an estimate, a reconstruction from finite, noisy data. It too must come with an error bar, but of a different kind. This error bar tells us not just how well the rule fits past data, but how far we can trust it when conditions change, and how likely it is to crack under stress. A rule without these meta-specifications is dangerously incomplete. It is a promise without a warranty. The core concept is, every admitted rule must ship with a complete robustness package. This package contains three essential documents. 1. A confidence interval for the rule, confidence G. This is a statistical measure of how well the rule's parameters are determined by the existing data. It answers, given the uncertainties in the phi sentences used to infer rule G, what is the range of slightly different rules that are also consistent with that data? This is the rule's own uncertainty delta at the level of grammar. 2. A stability radius, stability radii G. This is a measure of how much perturbation the rule can survive. It quantifies the size of changes in omega, k, or v conditions, or in external parameters within which the rule continues to hold within its confidence interval. It defines the safe operating region of the rule. 3. A sensitivity map, sensitivity underscore map G. This is a detailed catalog of the rule's dependencies. Which assumptions is it highly sensitive to? Does it depend critically on a specific gauge choice, a neglect of friction, an assumption of isolation, a linear approximation? The map shows which knobs, when turned slightly, cause the rule's predictions to change a lot. Let me state the audio equation that packages a rule. We say, a rule is packaged as the set containing G, confidence of G, stability radius of G, and sensitivity map of G. In symbols, G, confidence G, stability range G, sensitivity map G. This is the full, honest product that the firewall allows to be licensed and distributed. A rule presented as just G is a stripped-down, unlicensed prototype. Now, why is this necessary? The failure mode it prevents is brittle overconfidence, the application of a rule far outside its stability radius, leading to catastrophic yet unforeseen failure. This is the story of every engineering disaster, where a known law was applied in a new regime without checking its stability margins. It is also the story of theoretical dead ends, where a beautiful rule is clung to long after data shows it is exquisitely sensitive to tiny changes, requiring endless patches and epicycles. The stability radius and sensitivity map force us to be honest about the rule's weaknesses. They turn a rule from an idol into a tool with a clearly labeled instruction manual and failure modes. To understand this, consider an analogy from the ancient and enduring practice of building with mud brick and wooden arches, as seen in traditional Afghan architecture. A master builder doesn't just know the rule. An arch stands if its shape is a circular segment. He knows the full robustness package for that rule in his context. Based on his experience building 100 arches, he is 95% confident that the optimal rise to span ratio for stability with his local mud brick mix is between 0.15 and 0.18. This is his confidence interval for the rule's parameter. He knows the rule's stability radius. The arch will stand if the foundation settles unevenly by no more than 2 centimeters, if the wind load does not exceed a certain force, and if the moisture content of the bricks stays below 10%. These are perturbations in the environmental parameters, analogous to omega or K or V conditions that the rule can tolerate. Outside this radius, the rule, the arch stands, fails. Sensitivity map. His sensitivity map tells him the rule is highly sensitive to the curing time of the mortar and the alignment of the keystone. A small error there causes large failure. It is less sensitive to minor variations in brick color or exact surface smoothness. A novice builder who knows only the simple geometric rule, build an arch, will have collapses. The master's knowledge of the rule's robustness package is what allows for enduring, safe structures. The epistemic firewall demands that our scientific rules come with the same master-level documentation. In Holophase terms, the arch is a constraint G on phi patterns, perhaps a stability condition for a certain soliton or a conservation law. The building materials and environmental conditions are the specific omega, K, and Vive regimes, and the other parameters in the reconstruction. The robustness package tells us where this phi pattern rule is reliable. Now, what is the formal meaning in Holophase terms? A rule G is a functional constraint on phi and its derivatives. It is inferred from a set of phi sentences reconstructed in Windows WI, each with uncertainties. The confidence G is derived from the propagation of all those sentence-level uncertainties through the statistical fitting or theoretical derivation process that produce G. It might be expressed as credible intervals for any constants in G, or as a Bayesian posterior probability for the rule itself. The stability radius is defined in the space of triunity parameters and other system descriptors. We ask, how much can we perturb the underlying conditions, change the dominant omega, alter the characteristic K, boost the relevant V, before the constraint G phi equals 0 is violated by reality. This radius is tested by the empirical constraint process, part 9, but here we quantify its size. For example, Newtonian mechanics has a large stability radius for V, velocity is up to about 10% of light speed, but a very small one for K at atomic scales. Its stability radius is not a single number. It's a multidimensional boundary in omega K by V space. Crucially, stability is tested under perturbations that affect omega, K, and V simultaneously. Reality doesn't perturb just one echo. Changing a temperature might affect both the thermal vibration frequencies, omega, and the lattice spacing, K, which in turn changes sound propagation speeds, V. A robust rule should have a stability radius that accounts for these coupled perturbations. Let's connect this to energy as tele. Energy predictions are outputs of the rule G. Therefore, energy predictions inherit the stability characteristics of the law. A fragile, brittle law with a small stability radius will yield energy tallies that become meaningless or wildly inaccurate with tiny changes in conditions. A robust law yields energy tallies that degrade gracefully as you approach the boundary of its stability radius. The tally might become approximate, but it doesn't explode to infinity or flip sign unpredictably. This graceful degradation is a signature of a law that captures something real, as opposed to a mathematical contrivance that works only at a single precise point. Think of it like the accounting for a multi-generational Afghan business involved in agriculture, trade, and rentals. A robust accounting rule, like annual profit equals harvest income plus trade margin minus operating costs, will yield a sensible, useful tally even in a moderately bad year, a perturbation. The numbers change, but the categories and relationships hold. A brittle, contrived accounting rule, like profit is always exactly 15% of the eldest son's age times the number of sheep, might give a plausible number in a specific year, but a tiny perturbation, the son has a birthday, one sheep dies, makes the tally absurd. The fragility of the tally reveals the nonsense of the rule. The stability radius of the first rule is large. The second rule's stability radius is 0. It works for exactly one set of conditions. The operational interpretation of this firewall function is the practice of uncertainty quantification, UQ, and sensitivity analysis, SA, in advanced science and engineering. When a model or law is developed, part of the validation suite is to run it through a Monte Carlo simulation, varying all input parameters within their known uncertainties, and map out the resulting distribution of outputs. This generates the confidence. Then, you stress test the model. You push the input parameters beyond their observed ranges and see when and how the model breaks. This maps the stability area. Finally, you use statistical techniques to determine which input parameters the outputs are most sensitive to, creating the sensitivity map. The firewall role is to block the licensing of rules that have not undergone this analysis, or whose analysis reveals fatal brittleness. It ensures that the scientific community does not fall in love with rules that are mathematical miracles under perfect, impossible conditions, but shatter in the real world. Let's state clearly what assumptions are allowed and forbidden. Allowed. You may propose a rule G with unknown or large confidence intervals, a small stability radius, and high sensitivity, provided you explicitly declare this in its license. A rule can be provisional and fragile. The honesty is in the labeling. Forbidden. You may not present or license a rule without quantifying, to the best of current ability, its confidence, stability radius, and sensitivity. You may not hide known brittleness. You may not apply a rule in a regime known to be outside its stability radius without severe warning labels and explicit downgrade of its license for that application. What happens when the check fails? When a rule is found to be more fragile than previously claimed, or when it is applied beyond its stability radius with negative consequences, the firewall triggers a license consequence. This is not a single action, but a graded response. Apply a downgrade label, for example, fragile, high sensitivity. Tighten the scope of the license to stay well within the demonstrated stability radius. Inflate the stated uncertainty of the rule's predictions, or in severe cases, require a redesign of the entire rule family to find a more robust formulation. Now, we must state the explicit prediction and falsification for rule-level stability. Prediction. Robust laws degrade gracefully at boundaries. As you approach the edge of a rule's stability radius, for example, as velocities approach a significant fraction of light speed for Newtonian mechanics, the rule's predictions will begin to deviate from reality in a continuous, systematic way. The energy tally will become increasingly inaccurate, but it won't suddenly predict infinite mass or reverse causality. The failure is smooth, not catastrophic. This graceful degradation often provides the clues needed to find the more general rule that has a larger stability radius, like special relativity. Falsification of a rule's claimed robustness. If tiny, practically negligible changes in omega or k by v conditions, changes well within what should be the rule's stability radius, cause the rule to flip from success to dramatic failure, then the rule is brittle and must be downgraded. The falsifying condition is discontinuous or hypersensitive failure. This reveals that the rule was likely overfitted to a very specific set of conditions and does not capture a general principle. It is a candidate for immediate license tightening or retirement. A historical example is the Wien approximation for blackbody radiation. It was a rule that fit high frequency, high omega, data very well. But it was brittle. A tiny move to lower frequencies, a small change in the omega regime, caused it to fail catastrophically, predicting energy densities plunging to zero instead of matching the observed rise. Its stability radius in omega space was very small. This brittleness falsified it as a fundamental law. In contrast, Planck's law, which replaced it, had a much larger stability radius, gracefully reducing to the Wien approximation at high frequencies and to the Rayleigh-Jeans law at low frequencies. Planck's law was robust. Now let's explore an Afghanistan-inspired analogy to illustrate stability radii and sensitivity in a social context. Consider the unwritten rule governing the resolution of a water dispute between two farmers sharing a carez. The traditional rule G might be, the elder of the upstream village allocates time slots based on land area. Confidence G. The community is highly confident in this rule. It has worked for generations. Stability radius G. The rule is stable under perturbations like a 10% variation in water flow or a small increase in the number of families. But its stability radius has boundaries. It becomes unstable if the water flow drops by 50%, drought, or if a powerful external actor, a government official or a warlord, intervenes. These are points where the rule breaks down. The rule is highly sensitive to the perceived impartiality and legitimacy of the elder. If his integrity is questioned, the rule fails. It is less sensitive to the exact method of measuring land area within reason. Now, a new, modern rule, G prime, is proposed. Allocation is by a sealed bid auction in Afghanis. This rule might work in one season with a specific set of wealthy farmers, but its sensitivity map might show it is catastrophically sensitive to the presence of cash liquidity among farmers. A tiny perturbation, a bad harvest that reduces cash on hand, causes the rule to fail completely, leading to conflict and no water distribution. Its stability radius is tiny. The firewall, acting as the wisdom of the community, would reject rule G prime as too brittle for the highly variable real-world conditions, despite its mathematical elegance. It would stick with the more robust traditional rule, or seek a hybrid with a larger stability radius. In physics, many theories of everything candidates are in this position. Mathematically elegant, but with a stability radius of zero when confronted with the actual data of particle masses and couplings. They are hypersensitive to minute parameter choices. The firewall demands this be stated up front, preventing premature canonization. Now we must state the mandatory episode 11 axioms, now applied to the rule's very structure. Rules do not become real by elegance, consensus, or tradition. They earn a license only by surviving falsification, variation, independence, and scope discipline. The robustness package is the quantitative report card for this survival. Falsification attempts probe the stability radius. Variation tests map out that radius. Independence is confirmed when different methods find similar robustness profiles. Scope discipline is explicitly defined by the stability radius and sensitivity map. And when a rule fails, we do not believe harder. We tighten, downgrade, or retire its license. The graded license consequences, downgrade labels, scope tightening, are the precise administrative tools for managing failure within this framework. The skill you gain from this part is robustness assessment. You learn to interrogate any scientific claim by asking for its robustness package. What is the confidence interval on this effect? What is the stability radius of this model? What is it most sensitive to? This skill is essential for anyone applying science in the real world: engineers, doctors, policymakers, and for evaluating theoretical claims. It turns you from a passive consumer of scientific pronouncements into an active, critical evaluator of their practical and fundamental strength. This has direct implications for the replication crisis in some sciences, a finding that is incredibly sensitive to minor, unreported details of experimental protocol has a near-zero stability radius. It is a brittle finding. The firewall would label it as such and prevent it from being licensed as a general rule until its robustness is improved through pre-registered, multi-lab replication across varied but controlled protocols. Finally, let's summarize the epistemic function of this part. We have defined rule-level uncertainty and stability radii as the mechanism for quantifying the robustness of a rule G. A fully licensed rule is packaged as G, confidence G, stability range G, sensitivity map G. Stability is tested under coupled perturbations to omega, K, and V conditions. Energy predictions inherit this stability profile. Robust laws yield gracefully degrading tallies, brittle laws yield fragile, nonsensical ones. The explicit prediction is graceful degradation at boundaries for robust laws. The explicit falsification condition for claimed robustness is brittle, hypersensitive failure to tiny perturbations. The license consequences are downgrade labels, scope tightening, uncertainty inflation, or requirement for rule family redesign. This strengthens the firewall by adding the final layer of meta-awareness. It forces us to acknowledge that our rules are not perfect reflections of phi. They are imperfect, approximate maps. The quality of the map is not just in its accuracy at one point, but in its reliability across a territory. By requiring explicit documentation of this reliability, the firewall prevents the tragedy of applying a beautiful, precise map of a single village to navigate an entire mountain range, a sure path to disaster. If you want to see the full mathematical derivations and exact equations behind this idea, you can search for Holophase on Zenodo. There you will find the scientific papers that this audio journey is built on. Carry the discipline of robustness assessment with you. In a world of complex models and bold claims, let this be your litmus test. No robustness package, no serious license. Now we bridge to the penultimate consideration. Even a rule with a good robustness package might still be an illusion, not of nature, but of our measurement apparatus. Even a robust rule can be a sensor illusion. Next, independence from instruments. Salam and peace be upon you.